Officially welcome to Demystifying SEO, Best Practices for Photographers. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Rachel from the marketing team at PhotoShelter, and today we're going to be talking all things SEO, from best practices to tips and tricks, and what you should be on the lookout for as a photographer, as well as what we've done recently at PhotoShelter to help increase visibility for our members and really help our members get found online. We have done our best to keep the information in today's presentation broad enough so that all types of photographers, using all types of tools can take advantage of what you learned today. But as I mentioned, we will be speaking a bit about what we're doing at PhotoShelter to help photographers get found, and many of our examples will also be PhotoShelter specific. So for the official introductions, I have with me today Jelan Coley, Senior Technical Support Specialist at PhotoShelter. And if you've emailed or called us in the past, chances are you've probably spoken with Jelan a time or two. She was recently SEO certified and is one of our in-house SEO experts on our tech support team. And she also helped to build out our brand new SEO support documentation, which she'll talk about in just a little bit. So we're really super excited to have Jelan with us today, sharing all of her knowledge and expertise. So Jelan, again, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And again, we also have Grover Sanschagrin with us, PhotoShelter co-founder and general manager. And Grover and his team have been working super hard to help boost SEO for our members. And he's going to talk a little bit today about the changes we've made. And again, what we're doing to help photographers increase their visibility online. So Grover, so glad you're able to join us. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and before I hand things over to Jelan to kick us off, I wanted to let everybody know that we will be live tweeting during today's webinar, sharing more resources and information. So if you use Twitter, please feel free to follow along there. We'll also be sure to include all of these resources in our blog wrap up next week. And again, for those of you who might just be joining us, we are recording this webinar and we will be sharing the full recording and a wrap up on our blog early next week. And if you're here, you will be emailed as soon as that's ready. All right, Jelan, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, give me just one sec.
Okay, so let's begin. I just wanted to go over some of the things that we will cover and some of the things we won't cover. We'll go over best practices for your metadata. That's one of the most frequently asked questions we get in the support team. We are going to go over the SEO updates, as Rachel just mentioned, and Grover is going to help us a little bit with that. And we're going to talk about off-page SEO factors, which are something that it's a little hard to get a good grasp on, like what you should really do to get SEO from the off-page factors. And what we won't cover today is specific SEO strategy related to a specific user's account or scenario, just because we don't have the time. And we won't go over Bing and Yahoo specific SEO related tips. Just for context, Google represents about 63% of searches. So if you're focusing on Google, the rest will trickle down into the other search engines. If you're ranking highly in Google, it'll most likely carry over. And we won't go over paid advertising. And one more note is that although in the support team, we can help you understand certain SEO fields and where to find them in your account, we can't market the site on your behalf, provide custom SEO strategy, which is just like sitting down with you and telling you what keywords to use, that kind of thing, or guarantee a boost in search results or performance. So these are really just best practices, and let's get into it. So some quick definitions. There are three things that comprise a search engine. Something called a crawler, which is a bot that will scan all content across the internet and gather that information into something called an index. That index is what will be searched eventually. So the query processor, when you pull up Google and you see the search bar, that's the query processor. And it will scan the index for anything related to that search that was put in, and it will rank the results in search engine rank results pages based on an algorithm. And that algorithm is something that changes so often with Google that it makes it a little difficult for us to keep up, us being any kind of website company related to people having their own website and caring about SEO. And they're also ranked based on relevance to the search query, proximity to the searcher, and the prominence of the site in the eyes of Google. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And by the way, we have an SEO checklist. So if you're a PhotoShelter member, or if you just think that you want to see what any more information that wasn't given in this presentation, you want to check that out, we have a checklist. So if you wanted to go check that out, it's in our support center. And another reminder is SEO is a moving target and requires continued work. And that is both on your part as someone who has a website and on our part as Grover can probably talk a little bit more too. So the first thing is know your audience. There are a few questions that we're going to go over here, but in general, this is how you can help define your audience. What would you like people to search for in Google or other search engines to land on your site's homepage? For instance, if you specifically want people to hire you for graduation photos and you're located in New Orleans, what is something that someone would type in for that? They would type in graduation portrait photographers, New Orleans, most likely. So you want to make sure that you have that somewhere on your site. And you can have that on a custom page if you wanted to list your services. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. And the more niche that you are, the better your results will be for that specific search. So for instance, instead of just having New England stock photography as a keyword, you can say New England iconic landmark stock photography. So if that's specifically what you're tailoring your site to, that's your whole gig. And who are your competitors in this space? It's important to, if you've identified who those people or organizations are, that you see how they talk to their audience and the way they write. Use that to apply it to your own business, but of course you'd have to tailor it to specifically what makes you special, what makes you stand out. And if you have any issues with like how things are phrased on your site, I would say to just come up with two different samples and just pose it to a friend or somebody else that is prominent in your industry and say, which one sounds better to you? Which one do you think you'd click on more? Which would keep you on the page longer? So yeah, just use your best judgment with that. And in terms of marketing yourself, what other sites or forums or social media are your clients spending time on? It's important to remember this because it can help you, it'll help inform the way you write. So if you have a blog and you are an active member in forums related to photography, you can write more long form than you would if if your audience is spending most of their time on social media, where you have to be kind of just punchy and like very specific and concise. And now for on-site SEO. I use that GIF just because I know it's very difficult for people to sit down and just work on all your images and add metadata specific to each image. But we have some guidelines. You want to use the information that you've found from the beginning with defining your audience. You should know by the end of those questions, you should have a statement that starts with something like, my target audience is, and then you should give a specific demographic. You should be able to describe that target audience so that you know that you can know that you're approaching the right direction when you're speaking to them or trying to speak to them. And keep in mind that search engines tailor results to your geographic location, and that is especially true for mobile search. So if you were to search on your phone, you might rank higher for your location than you would on a web search for your specific geographic location and its proximity to the searcher. So that's just a little tidbit to keep in mind. Make sure you mention what areas you service. And we're going to move on to custom page suggestions. When making content for your pages, especially custom pages, you have to really think about who your reader is and why they care about what's going on that page. Google evaluates the word count, grammar, accuracy, among other things. And the more niche and unique your content is, and the better it's written for a human reader, the more traffic you'll get, most likely, because someone will stay on your page longer and it'll be easier to share it with other people who would find that information helpful. If you're writing specifically to Google, like if you try to stuff a bunch of keywords in one sentence, it's not going to be very helpful for you because it's not going to be as readable. So really keep in mind that you'll get organic traffic if you write the way you'd speak. I think Grover is going to have some more information, a little anecdote on niche content a little later in the presentation.
Yeah, the custom pages were something that we just really updated in a round of SEO updates we did to PhotoShelter. That's because they're so valuable in terms of creating special content, like you can highlight a niche or something in that spot. In particular, what we did was we made it we gave the user better control over their meta description and page titles, which are both key things that for SEO. So now for each one of those pages, you can custom write and manage those fields.
Right. And so taking a step further, you can have an unlimited number of custom pages in PhotoShelter. And since those can have a unique page title and meta description, you can create as many pages as you want and talk about as much as you want. So some topic examples I've seen working here, I've seen people write about the prints that they offer or the products, pricing, if you have a specific package of service, if you're a wedding photographer, I've seen people put up their pricing on a specific page. And another thing that's good about that too, splitting out the content onto different pages, is that you can have traffic go directly toward that specific keyword. Another thing is testimonials and awards. I've seen that. Press, affiliates, and tear sheets. And by affiliates, I mean that, like, let's say you're a wedding photographer and you went to a venue. That venue can list a bunch of different photographers that they recommend on their own affiliates page, and you can give them a link as well, a backlink. We'll talk a little bit about backlinks a little later. For specific pages, you may have seen, if you're a PhotoShelter member, you will recognize that screenshot to the right. Under the paragraph symbol, you can choose the different kinds of fonts. Header 1 is, you should only have one header 1 or H1 on any given page. So if you're going to make a custom page, like your about page, or your about page or anything like that, use only one header 1 page. Only one header font. Image pages in the archive use the IPTC title as H1 and then headline if there's no title field. And I'll show you a little bit more about that later.
We did get one question here I thought maybe I'd bring up now. So Dan asks, I'm a commercial photographer, but I also sell stock photos. So can we talk about the difference between being found as a photographer for assignments versus SEO for individual stock photos? Any insight that we can share on that? We have gotten a few other questions about stuff that I know we're going to cover later, so I'll leave those for a little bit.
I can talk a little bit about that. So in particular, if you wanted to make sure that you're getting traffic for both of those topics, then I would suggest making a custom page about each. So talk about your services that you offer on one custom page for getting hired and things like that. Talk about people that you've worked with in the past. And then you can have a separate page for stock photography specifically, like, why you started, how they can purchase, things like that. Grover, I'm not sure if you have any other suggestions with that.
Yeah, there's a little bit that we're going to talk about the Google search, image search, or Google image licensing that's coming up that will really kind of take care of the stock part. So, but I agree with what you said about custom pages for specialties for sure.
Yeah, and just for a little more information, the more text you have to give context to your website, like of course you're going to have to fill out your metadata, which is the next section. You also have the option to add text to describe other things, like, you know, if you have two different businesses under one website, you can talk about that on different pages.
Yeah, it's a great tip.
It may also be helpful to make sure that when you're describing those things, that you show a bit of your personality, talk about the way you work, talking about the people you like to work with, give them an understanding of how you work instead of just kind of like showing images and links. Make sure they can get a feel for how it is that it's going to be like to work with you.
Yeah, I agree with that. That lends to the part I was saying earlier about making it human readable, make them stay engaged and read the whole page. So I'm not going to read all of these, but there are key metadata fields in your images that you should make sure you're filling out in order for them to be optimized for Google search or any other search. And they're tagged with a green SEO tag in PhotoShelter. I'm sorry if you can hear those sirens. Web statement URL and licensor URL are two new fields that are part of the Google image licensing program, and Grover's going to talk about that in just a second. And this is just a graphic of the SEO tag that you want to look for when you're editing metadata. So you can edit metadata before you upload, as you may know, in Photoshop or Lightroom, or you can edit it in PhotoShelter. And Grover, I don't know if you want to take it over from here, but these two new fields are something that we've just created to be compliant with the Google Image License Program.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty exciting opportunity, and this is supposed to launch in August. PhotoShelter is part of the beta program, so they notified us pretty early on that this was going to be coming, and then they gave us all the information we needed to make our system compliant. By adding these two these two IPTC fields, it basically gives Google everything they need for this program. So the reason why this is great for us is because a lot of times people would come to PhotoShelter, they'd get a website, and then they'd kind of hope that we'd also find them customers. I have a website, now can you help me get customers? And we're in the archive hosting website business, but we're not in the marketing game. Google Images early on used to be seen by a lot of photographers as a threat. Oh my God, my images are showing up in Google Images. It feels like they're stealing them. I'm uncomfortable with this. What am I getting out of it? Well, now it's going to become a source of traffic. And so we got really excited about this and decided to support this as much as we possibly could. So we kind of went a little overboard. We supported this more than I think anyone ever will. All of the data that Google's looking for is all, for the image. These two terms, these two links are included inside of the HTML of the page in exactly the way that Google wants it. But also we went one step further. We injected all of this data into the image file itself. So if somebody were to, say a bad person, were to come and take your image off of your website and then put it on theirs, that data would follow it. It would still be there. So Google, if they indexed it on that other person's page, all this information would still be there, including links back to your site. So, so this is a really exciting time. We also knew that there's people that have like 500,000 or more images in their archive, all of which they want to make available for selling, for licensing or stock. So you're not going to batch process or one by one all this information into every image. So we have a tool that you can use. You just call in to folks like Jelan or someone in a technical support team, give them those 2 URLs, and then they can just apply that to every image in your archive. So definitely, if you have a whole bunch of images, use that. But this is an exciting time, and I'm really glad that we're supporting it to the extent that we are.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I saw here that Larry had a question about the difference between web statement URL and licensor URL. So hopefully this slide clears that up for you, Larry.
Additionally, there's more information in our support center about what these fields are called in different programs. So for Photoshop and Lightroom versus Photo Mechanic versus our product, you'll see a chart to tell you what those fields are if you wanted to edit them outside of PhotoShelter. And yeah, definitely send us an email if you want us to do this in batch. Just make sure you send us both of the links that you want us to enter for you.
And I don't know if I was clear, but like maybe I missed a little point, but what this is going to do is inside of when you do a search result, and when you're in Google Images, and it'll show a little licensable badge inside of the thumbnail. And then it'll include information underneath that in text that says, you know, who basically is licensing this, and then how you can get information about licensing it. So that's the big difference between now and what's going to happen in August.
Right, and then on this slide it says, for example, you can use the contact page on your site for the licensor URL. If you already have a link to something like that that isn't your contact page, definitely send it to us. It doesn't have to be exactly what's written on this slide. Now we're going to move on to keyword tips. So you really want to think about what someone would search for when they want to find your site or specific images on your site. And I have a little GIF to the right here. So if you were to type in corporate headshots in New York, you can see what other phrases people are typing in to look for people, for photographers. So just use that as a little, guidance. You can see that people are entering specifically location because they've narrowed down their audience to this is who I service. Keywords can be a single word or phrases. Don't be afraid to use something like Colombian Arabica coffee beans for stock images of that specific thing versus simply coffee beans. It's okay to have both, but be as specific as possible, because if someone wanted that very specific image, they would be able to find it with that entire phrase. So don't be afraid of phrases and keywords. We suggest to use at least 5 keywords per image, and the quantity is not as important as the quality. So that goes back to the phrases thing. And just as simple housekeeping, use a comma and space between each. The description.
Hey,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Before we move on, we did get a couple of questions rolling in about the Google Images licensing beta. So I just wanted to make sure people are aware. So someone's asking here, will Google have access to my full-sized images?
No, it's just essentially you're just giving them a pointer to where those images are and where they could license them.
Exactly.
It's their way of saying, it's kind of cool actually. It's their way of saying like, hey, don't steal images. This is an image you need to license, or you can license it. So it's making that distinction. But it's not like Google is becoming an agency. They don't have your images. It's all with you, and it's just they're driving people to you.
Right.
Exactly.
And
yeah, the next question was about that too. So I think we've answered that well.
Another point about that is just in general, our sites only display the images at a maximum of 2040 pixels on the longest side. So we're never going to serve up your full image. So the highest that Google can index is that 2040 size image. So in PhotoShelter, we use the description or caption field as the alt text for each image. And just as an overview, alt text is used for visually impaired readers or site visitors. And it's used to give context to an image if the image doesn't load. So you want to consider the who, what, where, when, and why of what's in the image. You want to be concise. So you don't want to have an extremely long description caption because alt text is meant to be concise and short. An additional IPTC information tips are in our support center. So you also want to make sure you're not stuffing this with keywords, like I mentioned before. Don't just add a long list. It should be geared toward a human reader. So,
quick question, Jelan.
yeah.
I have somebody asking here for any tips on file names. So we talked a little bit about keywords, but do we have any tips on how people should be titling file names?
So file names are not as important as adding these metadata fields. So we're going to go over this a little bit later, but there's a cascade. So you want to make sure you're filling out the headline field, the title field, and the description field. If those things are not there, then the file name will be the next in the cascade that Google will see. So really don't worry too much about the file name. It's not as important as those other fields.
Great, and then just a quick clarification,
Yeah.
when we talked about commas, commas and space between each phrase or between each word?
Between each keyword. So if your keyword is coffee beans, there would be a comma after beans and a space, and then the next keyword.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any other questions
I
on that
think
part?
that's good for now. Let's go ahead and I'll interrupt when I've got more.
Okay. Sure. So an example here, this is an image from Chris Oyoung, one of our product managers. This is on the downtown template, if anyone's curious. Highlighted in red is the description caption field, which displays in the archive section of the website. And you can see if you were to view the page source, which is that second screenshot underlined, it's displaying as the alt text as well. So you want to model your alt text after your description caption / alt text after this slide here. And you'll notice how specific it is to exactly what it is, exactly who's in it, what date it happened, where it is, things like that.
Going back to captions for a sec, we have somebody asking if it's okay to repeat the caption if it's from the same shoot, if you have a bunch of images in the same shoot.
I think that's fine. Grover, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's fine because they're two different page links. If they're two different images, you're not, when I say duplication or, stuffing keywords, I mean for one particular image. Is that correct, Grover? Am I assuming that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, like if it's the same image, or if it's an image from the same event, it probably should have,
Right.
most of the same information in the caption. You're not going to get a duplicate content penalty for that.
Right. Yeah. It's fair game for each of those images as their own because they stand as separate pages. That's what I believe we just mentioned.
Yeah, and I know we're going back to we'll be talking about the cascade in a little bit, but we have somebody asking here, should we be inputting both a headline and a title?
Yes.
Clear cut.
Yeah. just for the sake of complete metadata, make sure that you fill out everything. And if for specifically display on the page, we'll talk about the cascade a little bit later.
Got it.
These terms are also used all over the place in different ways. So it may be showing up one way on your website, but Google may be using something to display it as the headline or the subtext or something. So everything that is in PhotoShelter that has those SEO emblems is there because it shows up somewhere in some search engine somehow, some way, or it's being used for indexing purposes.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
We have a lot of questions coming in around this topic, so I'll just do one more for now. And again, we'll try to get to everyone's questions when we do our wrap up on the blog next week. But we have someone asking here, does it sort of count against you if you use the same text in the headline, title, and caption for a single image or a group of images?
I wouldn't think so. But again, for the headline and the caption you have a little more room to be more detailed. You still want to be concise, but the title, like if you think about it, if you're titling an article, you wouldn't put a whole long description. but you can do that for the description caption field. And I don't believe you're penalized if you had duplicate content in those 3 fields. Is that correct?
This as like I see this as like an opportunity for more keywords. Like it's more locations that you can put more keywords in. So if you put the same stuff in every option, you're kind of blowing an opportunity where you could have more things, more searchable keywords integrated.
Right. And another thing to note is the IPTC standards website actually gives you a good little description of what should be in the headline field versus the title field. We also have that in our support center if you wanted to check that out, just in case you wanted to vary those fields a little bit with keywords.
Great.
Good. Okay, so searchability attribute, this is proprietary to PhotoShelter. So you should make sure to mark your images as publicly searchable if you want them to be available in advanced search on your site, as well as Google and Bing and Yahoo and all of their search engines. So you can do that in batch by selecting all the images in a gallery. And then under the actions menu, you can do make searchable / unsearchable. And there's a little indicator to the left that will show you a magnifying glass symbol when the image is marked as searchable. And you'll see some of the other thumbnails are not because I haven't clicked that button yet. Page titles and metadata. So this is going to get into a little bit of the cascade we were talking about earlier. A page title is a short description of a web page that typically appears in your browser's tab when viewing a web page. So I have 2 screenshots here. The one on the left is for an image. Actually, that image we just looked at previously. You'll see in the tab, there's the title of the, well, it's actually the headline, but it's it's pulling from the metadata in that file. So if you fill out the IPTC headline, you'll see that reflected in the tab. If the headline is not there, it will pull from the title, and then it'll pull from the file name. So you'll see the file name is not as important, but just it's good to have context in the file name, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's more about the metadata. On the right side, this screenshot is for any other page on your site that isn't an image page. So the home page, the built-in pages like the about and contact pages and custom pages all have page titles, unique page titles and meta descriptions. So I have a little example below. So an okay version of a page title is Joe Smith Photography, serving the OC for 20 years. That one's not as good because you want to have the most important information sooner. And that goes for on the page, in a title, in a description. So what's better is Orange County, commercial photographer, Joe Smith Photography, because you're not abbreviating. For metadata fields, you want to make sure you're not abbreviating if you have a character limit. So Google recommends 70 or fewer characters for a page title. And you want to make sure that you're giving as much context to the meta description as possible, the meta title as possible. Meta description.
Going back to the searchability for just one sec, we have a question here. Do you need to select this to make your images searchable on Google or just on your site, or both?
It's for both, and that's if you want to make sure that your images are searchable. So make sure that you select that if you want your images to be found. So it'll be found publicly. So in your site, in Google, in any other search engine that can crawl a web page and index it.
Got it.
Any others?
Let's keep going for now.
All right. Page meta descriptions are next. So this one takes a little more thought. This is also a frequently asked question that we get in support. In search results, the meta description will show below the page link. So this top right screenshot, Marie Fry is one of our employees. and her URL is in green. Her website's title is in blue above that, and below it is the meta description. And what's good about this meta description is it tells you the name of the photographer, that she is a travel and wildlife photographer, which are good keywords, based in New York City. So that gives proximity. For best results on all devices, keep these descriptions to 100 or 160 or fewer characters. And this is not a hard limit, but that's the maximum that Google will show in a page preview in search results. So Google will be able to read the rest of it, but don't take that as an opportunity to just stuff it with keywords. Be sure to stay concise, 1 to 3 sentences, including great keywords that you need. So to the left, we have one of our members' about page meta descriptions. And you'll see that he mentions his name, where he's located, and since this is just his about page, he's talking about what he's about, what he's all about. And you can see it's concise. It's under 160 characters, and it's relevant to the page content, which this is not the page itself, it's just the meta information. So the rest of the page actually talks about himself.
So you mentioned like don't overstuff it with keywords. We had somebody asking a question a few slides back about keywording, and at what point do you need to be concerned about like keyword spamming? Like how many keywords is too many keywords to include?
Grover, I'm not sure if you have an answer for that. I don't think it's an exact number, but if you feel like you're listing a bunch of keywords, you're not going down the right path.
I think the way I look at it is that like each time you put a keyword in there, it takes away power from another one. So if you have like a ton of keywords in there, all of them are less important. Let's say you had 3 keywords in there. Those 3 keywords would be way more powerful than like 10. So there's a dance there, right? You need to make sure that you're not overdoing it and putting something in there that people aren't going to be searching for.
Right.
But keep it to really what is appropriate.
Yeah, and actually another thing to mention is on the page itself, it's a good practice to have about 3 to 4%, no more than that, of the page's content with the keyword that you're trying to optimize that page for. So you don't want to say over and over again, coffee beans, coffee beans, coffee beans, coffee beans, because you think that in order to help that rank higher. I hope that makes sense. If not, ask a question and then I'll clarify.
I think it makes sense.
Okay. So we're going to move on to gallery and collection descriptions. And this is for PhotoShelter specifically. And this is actually often overlooked by a lot of our members. You can add descriptions to each of your galleries and collections, which is readable to search engines crawling the on-page content. So this is not going to be included in the sitemap, but because Google and other search engine bots can crawl the page and read the text on that page, this is another opportunity to add keywords or anything related to that page so that Google can read it. And this can be found in the right pane of the image browser when a gallery or a collection is selected in the left pane of your image browser. And you'll see, this is my site. I just, not to plug myself, but I wanted to just show you that it shows up right above the thumbnails in the archive pages, so that all of the text on this page can be crawled. All right, now we're moving to offsite SEO, which is probably the hardest part. And this GIF is very accurate because when you have when you've completed all of your metadata, you want to also make sure that you are working on your offsite factors. So you created a beautiful website and now you want to market yourself. That's the next step. The first thing is to submit your sitemap to Google. If you want to track what content is being indexed on Google and manually request Google to crawl specific URLs, they do have a tool for that. you'll need to submit your sitemap to Google Search Console. And the good news for you guys is my colleague Amanda is going to be doing a webinar on Google Search Console so you can learn what's really relevant to you. I believe that's next week, Rachel?
Yep, next Friday at noon. Yep.
So make sure to check that out. And if you don't want to wait until then, our support center explains how you can find your sitemap URL and submit it to Google Search Console. We also have a really good resources page in our support center that will tell you how you can benchmark and measure yourself as you continue to add metadata to your site and see how it tracks over time. This is just
Jelan,
a screenshot.
super quick.
Oh yeah, sure.
We just have somebody asking what template you're using.
I was using Horizon, or I am using Horizon. Yeah. And so this is actually a screenshot of Karen, one of my colleagues, Search Console. She so graciously sent me this screenshot. And you can see that her total impressions are tracked here, total clicks, CTR, average position in Google. You can see all of that kind of stuff. And usually we get questions like, hey, why wasn't this indexed? There's actually a really good URL inspection tool that will be able to tell you if Google has it on their radar, essentially. I'm not going to get too far into that. That's Amanda's territory. But this is just an example.
You might be getting into this, or well, let's just ask it. Let's see. So you have somebody asking here, I'm using a CNAME and I've already submitted my sitemap. Should I also be submitting a sitemap for my PhotoShelter domain?
We do recommend that at this time because some of your pages are still hosted with the .photoshelter.com domain. We do recommend to submit your sitemap for that specific property. I think they call it properties in Search Console. And Grover, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the CNAME work that we're working on right now. That will not always be the case.
Yeah, one of the things we were trying to do in terms of our SEO updates was to eliminate any potential duplicate content issues that might show up. Google's not going to really penalize you like a lot of people think this is a penalty for duplicate content. There really isn't. Google's pretty savvy about this kind of thing. They understand the practicalities of life. But we wanted to eliminate it anyway because we wanted people's links to be able to be focused in one particular spot instead of like inbound links, right? They need to be like all focused on one page versus the possibility of two. So we're working on that. We've gotten rid of the PhotoShelter URL redirect in a majority of the pages already to take care of that problem. There's a couple that are left that we will be getting rid of as well in the next couple of months, but we need to update our CDN, which is I don't get into that whole technical thing.
Longer story.
I know. But once we update to the new CDN, which by the way just makes all your images load really fast for everybody all over the world, that will be updated, and once that happens, then it'll be able to support the single URL for those pages.
Thank you. So the next tip, which is extremely important, we have a lot of slides on it, is working on getting backlinked. So what's a backlink? It's a link on another site that leads to a page on your site. So a search engine will favor websites that are linked by other reputable sites, and there's an asterisk because I have to define what that means. This is critical if you want to increase your search engine performance. So a quality backlink is what really counts towards increasing your rank in search engine results pages. So the quality is based on reputation and relevance. So for example, if you're backlinked from a reputable news website, like let's say you were covering an event for your local newspaper, in one of their articles they backlink you, that's considered a quality backlink because that website is reputable, and it's updated regularly, which is something that Google looks good upon, or what's the phrase? Which looks good to Google.
They like it.
Yeah, they like it. It makes it more trustworthy. So the more quality backlinks you have, the more trustworthy your site is, and the more likely you will go up in the ranks. So it's very difficult to really pin down where you can get backlinked and ask people to backlink for you. So I have a few tips. Request backlinks to your custom pages on your site or to particular galleries or collections, since your homepage will organically have the most amount of traffic. Encourage your clients with websites or social media profiles to link to your website or social profiles, anything to bring traffic to you. Network and leverage any contacts you make while on a job. So again, I mentioned this earlier, but if you're on location for a wedding, you can network with the florist, the wedding venue, videographers, and exchange backlinks to each other, especially if they're doing really well in their market. You can get organic traffic through them backlinking to you. Ask to do a guest blog or do an Instagram takeover for those who have established themselves in your target market. That's a good way to get eyes on your stuff and get people to take a look at your specific galleries. Like if you have a new project you're working on, you want to make sure that you're linking to that. If you're a part of a social media group or forum, share your website with that audience and add a link to your social media profiles. So again, if you are really big on Instagram, or if you're not, in your bio, you can add one URL, I believe. You can add more with other plugins, but if you're working on a very specific project and it's taking you a few months and you really want people to look at that, you link specifically back to that gallery, collection, custom page. And we have more resources that you can check out in our Tracking Your SEO Progress and Resources in our support center. That's the name of the article.
We have someone here who likes to call backlinks Google Street Cred, which I like.
Yeah, that's a really good way. That's a really good way to say it. It's like a handshake. Yeah.
It's like a vote. It's like a vote or an endorsement for your site or content.
Exactly. I think that's how I phrased it in the article too. But so
Great.
Another thing is to consider a blog. Oh, Rachel, do you have something?
No, go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Consider a blog. So Google prioritizes content that is updated regularly. So again, if you can get a news website to send a backlink your way, because Google has a fresh bot that crawls to make sure that, oh, this site is updating regularly. This is probably a reputable site. Google will prioritize that. So that's something to keep in mind. New and relevant content on your blog can be backlinked to galleries and pages on your site. So on your own blog, if you wanted to send people to your newest project, backlink to your PhotoShelter site directly to that collection, or if you have a custom page about it, you could use it that way. The more shareable your content on the blog, the more traffic you can bring, which could funnel the traffic into your PhotoShelter site, your portfolio site. And just a tidbit, our templates have a blog integration with WordPress and Tumblr, which pulls in a feed of your content from blog posts, if you wanted to check that out. And number 10, set up a Google business profile. And Grover, I think you have a little bit to say about Google search results, but let me just go through my stuff first. A Google business profile will provide you with helpful analytics about your visitors, unique search queries that were used to find you, and it can help you make decisions moving forward. Make sure to fill out the services fields, services, products, and for your reviews, make sure you answer all of your reviews, even if they're negative, because it helps boost your credibility. So just taking a step back, if you were to do a Google search for Damari, who is one of our technical support people, If you were to do a search for his name, you're going to see the regular Google search results on the left, and then you'll see the Google business profile on the right. So it gives you a lot of prominence. And make sure that your citations are correct, the address, phone number, and your name, because this is a really good way to make sure that people are looking directly at your business. Grover, I'm not sure if you wanted to talk a little bit more about how Google has different elements.
Just a little thing to keep in mind, Google's got all these different properties and products like Maps and Google Business and whatever. It's YouTube, right? So it's a good idea to have content in all of these places for your keywords, because then it shows up. You know, they're trying to promote their products and show all of their different services that they have. So if you have something in each of those services, there's a chance that you could be, you know, at the top of a page because of it.
Right. And with Google Business Profile, again, they're going to be showing your results if you are if you're making sure to enter where you service. So Damari is servicing the greater New York area. So because I'm also in the greater New York area and I search for his name, I'm going to get this result. And I believe if, you know, he's optimized for any keywords in this area, he would get a good business profile result. And the last one, social media. So where possible, link your website to pages on, link your social profile to pages on your website, to places that you want to have higher traffic. So there are social follow icons in PhotoShelter that you can fill out. So if someone were to go to your PhotoShelter site and let's say they notice you have a LinkedIn profile, they can click into that and, you know, view any other work that you've done that you haven't added to your actual site. And this is a really good chart that we have in our support center. I'm not going to go through all of it. But for example, I think we've gone over Instagram, but it's a good way to engage with your audience and have a stronger following. So as long as you're engaging, I believe Instagram favors that. The more engagement that you have, the more that you answer to people's comments, the more followers you're going to get. And you know, if you've linked your PhotoShelter site into your profile, then you'll get traffic there as well. And that's it for right now. And then we have frequently asked questions. I'm not sure if Rachel, you wanted to go over something in the chat first, or if I should just jump right in.
Yeah, why don't we take some of these frequently asked questions first? These are questions that our team gets all the time, so we added a few of them in here. And then when that's done, we can take some more questions from the chat box. I know we probably are going to go a few minutes over time, so thanks everyone for sticking with us. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into these FAQs.
All right, sounds good. So how long will it take to see results? It's a very hard question to answer. There are so many factors involved with search engine algorithms changing so often and without notice. It takes generally about 3 months for your off-page factor, so backlinks and all of the work you've been doing there, to take effect. And Grover's going to talk a little bit more eloquently about that. But as long as you're making an effort to market your site and you filled out all of your IPTC metadata and done everything on our SEO checklist, you're setting yourself up for success. So Grover, I don't know if you want to take it from here.
No one's ever called me eloquent before, so thank you for that. I super appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, this came up a couple of days ago in our meeting, like, you know, how long does it take to see results? And I recently, well, not recently, but on the next slide, you'll see a chart that I put together from a project in my life. And this is when I'm not doing PhotoShelter stuff, I'm doing tequila stuff. I have a tequila app, a mobile app called Tequila Matchmaker. And that's why I'm in Mexico and have tequila in my office. But at the beginning, you know, we had just a page up, a little website that had like information about the app and how to download it in the Google Play Store or in the you know, App Store. And then we decided, well, actually, let's take all the content that we have, everything that we've got, all of our data, and put that into a website and expose it all. Some people were like, well, that's crazy because you're giving away everything. You know, you don't even have to download or sign up for the app, and you're giving it all away. You're gonna get less people using the app because all that stuff's out there on the web for free. And I thought, no way, because content is gold. If you have good content, everything will go up. So if you look on this chart, you'll see that we finished the new website around May, right? It had about 733 users per month. So a month, in the next month, Google came through and indexed it. So that took 1 month. And then it went to like 1,095. Then you'll see it kind of dips back down again to 733. So we were like, oh, like what's going on? Like this is like 2 months now. We should be seeing something by now. Then we decided, all right, the next month we decided let's create and submit a sitemap to Google, to the Webmaster Tools, and that more than doubled the traffic right away. And then ever since then, it's been going up and up. So you'll see like a year later, it was now 13,893. That's an additional 424 people on average per day. Another year later, we were up another 1,085 people per day. And then last month, or May, 2 months ago, so that would have been like the third year, right? We're up 2,736 people per day. So it takes a while. It's constantly growing. You have to be patient. You have to be focusing on the content and the quality of it, and making the data available to Google. So all of this pays off. It's just not going to be a magic overnight switch. Nothing's going to do that.
Right. And Grover, I remember you mentioned in one of our meetings that because you made those, a lot of that content available, you were talking about very niche tequila brands. And because people were searching for those things, that page was getting shared a lot. It was getting a lot of hits. Was I reading
Totally.
that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's another thing to keep in mind, and that's like competition, right? So like if you have a lot of photographers that are in your niche and you're using all the same keywords and the same type of content, and you're going to have a harder time. What we found was that the little obscure tequilas that nobody's ever heard of, add them all together, and that created lift for the entire site. So because there's less, there was always showing up first because nobody else had that kind of content. So,
Right.
what makes you special is what's also going to help you rise up to the top.
Yeah,
Right.
and Grover, we have somebody here who wants to know where you got this chart or where you found this chart.
I made it in they want to know like how I made it.
Well, if it's just something like you were able to pull from like analytics, or did you make it yourself?
Oh yeah,
And the answer is
yeah, it was all from Google Analytics tracking over the years for our tequila website.
great.
Right. And look, see, he started in January 2017. You can track the progress. So definitely get in there on the Search Console and Google Analytics. Start
Yeah,
tracking what your traffic is.
And
right.
those
Someone
little
else is
spikes.
just,
I'm sorry, but
sorry,
those
go
little
ahead, Grover.
spikes in there, those are all like, oh, that's Cinco de Mayo, or that was National Tequila Day, or that
Makes
was,
Yeah, we had someone else just asking, just as a general question, like, how do I know if Google is indexing my site or particular pages or images? And I guess a lot of that information can be found from using Google Search Console, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can actually, there's a tool in there, a URL inspector, where you can plug in that URL and ask and just run a search in Search Console, and it'll show you if it has been indexed and if not, why. And Google has some really good support articles around the reasons they give for why it is or isn't. But I believe Amanda's going to go over that more in
Yeah, she'll
depth
talk
next
about
week.
that in detail. Yeah,
Yeah.
so definitely join us next week for that webinar if you want to know more about that.
All right. Another question, what goes into my images being indexed on Google search? So we, based on all the slides I've showed you, we optimize every single image that's publicly listed and marked as searchable to be technically compliant with Google image search. So in order for all of it to work, you have to make sure you have it all filled out. you mark your images as searchable. And I think Grover, you might have a little bit more to say on this.
No, I think you just covered it.
Okay.
Hit the nail on the head.
All right, great. So who can help me with SEO strategy? So I mentioned at the beginning that we don't really have a service at PhotoShelter to help you, sit down and say, this is where you should market yourself. These are the keywords you should use. Other than these general tips, we're definitely happy to walk you through anything that was in this presentation, show you where to find things. If you have any questions in general, we can definitely help you out with that. But for specific strategy, there are a number of SEO experts that do specifically SEO strategy. It's called SEO strategy. And you can look for those people online mostly. We do have certified consultants, which that can be found on our homepage, photoshelter.com, under the resources section, or I think it's under more now. But if you look for certified consultants, we do have some that specialize in SEO strategy. So you can hire them to, follow you and walk you through all of these things that are related to your very specific business. Anyone else have anything to say on that, Grover? Okay, well, I'm gonna hand it back over to Rachel. Give me one moment.
All right. So we had a bunch of questions come through. I'm going to pick from a few of those right now. And if anyone else has any they'd like to send, please feel free. Again, if we didn't get to your question, we will do our best to answer it on the blog next week. So here's one that we got early in the session. Is there a way to have a page on your website that contains lots of keywords, but directs people to a homepage or a different page if they access it from Google? So kind of like you want to keep your website super clean and not too wordy, but you want Google to see all that stuff. So is there a way to sort of, play that game? Or what would you suggest in that case?
Well, there's something called, I forget what it's called, but Google does look down on if you have just a specific page or just like a huge list of keywords. It's considered a black hat technique, black hat SEO or something like that. I'm not sure if they mean like a page that contains other like links to other parts of the site. In that case, you can try that, but we have a menu option in PhotoShelter, so you can have a different custom page for each of those topics and optimize each of those pages for that specific keyword and have it in a menu item. So you don't need that gateway page. Okay, but I'm not sure if I was understanding that question correctly.
I think so. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And we have someone else asking here where they can find a guide on the Google Images licensing beta. Have we put something together? I know, Grover, we're going to be putting something on the blog pretty soon about that, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Do we have I know I've seen it in creation. I don't know if it's up on the support doc yet, as a support doc yet, but there's something that we're going to have pretty soon. There's not too much data out there yet about it. There's a couple of people that have done stuff, but we're going to be really getting into it in terms of what it's like for PhotoShelter users, especially to take advantage of it. But that should be a week.
In our support center, you can find those definitions that we had and the suggestions, and we'll be updating that as we get more information from Grover.
Cool. And going back to blogging and backlinking, is it more valuable or recommended to have a blog that's part of your own site or hosted somewhere else where you could link back to your own site? It's an interesting one.
That's an interesting one, yeah. I guess it's hard to say. So if you have two different places that you can, maybe your blog's getting a ton of traffic, but your portfolio site isn't, you can get a backlink from yourself to yourself and get more traffic to specific pages on your portfolio. Grover, I'm not sure if you have any specific opinions on that.
I mean, I think it's a good idea to have other places linking to you. Yeah, sure, it counts as a backlink, but it also gives you an opportunity to educate Google on what the content is, right? So, backlinks are important, but the text inside of the backlink, those are important keywords as well.
Yeah, the
And
anchor
so,
text.
right. So those are keywords that get attached to the page where it's going. So you could basically teach the search engines what that content is by using that strategy.
That's a really good point. And I just mentioned anchor text. So just in general, if I've ever sent you a support ticket and I've linked one of our support articles in it, so it's just like visit our support center, and the support center is hyperlinked, that is anchor text. So
Right.
like Grover was saying, that counts as a keyword for the
And the
pages.
worst thing is, the worst thing is, like, if you want to read my story about coffee beans, click here.
Click
And then
here.
click
Yeah.
here is the whereas coffee beans should have been the proper.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Okay. Quick question about how Lightroom titles some of these things. So do you know what Lightroom calls the license or URL field?
It's in our support center. I don't know it off the top of my head,
Okay.
but there's
So
a
then
chart
you'll
that
find it
says it.
there.
Yeah, definitely check
Great.
it out.
Cool. I think that's it for now. Again, we are a little bit over time, so why don't we go ahead and wrap up?
These are good questions.
So yeah, these are great questions. And again, if your question didn't get answered, we're going to do our best to do like a FAQ section in our blog wrap up next week. So definitely look out for that. And as we mentioned a few times during this presentation, we are hosting a webinar on Google Search Console next week, the 17th at noon, with Amanda from our tech support team. So we really hope that you'll join us for that. Amanda's going to talk a little bit more about how Google works in general and just how Google Search Console can help with your SEO, how to set all of that up. So we hope to see you there. And I did want to let you know, I mean, we have a lot of members with us today, but I know we also have some new faces here. And for some of the new folks, if you're interested in trying PhotoShelter, we'd love to offer you a free 14-day trial plus 30% off your first year with the promo code SEO webinar. So you can definitely head over to our site at photoshelter.com/signup and enter that promo code and give us a shot and see, what PhotoShelter can do to help boost your SEO. All right, well, I think that wraps us up for today. Jelan and Grover, again, thank you so much for being here with us. This was great. There will be a survey when you leave this webinar, so if you'd like to fill that out, we'd love to know what you thought and get your feedback. But I think that's it, and I hope to see everybody next week for our Google Search Console webinar.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. All right, goodbye, everyone.